Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to guide you through today's subject because it's just a fascinating one. We're going to focus our lens on a remarkable 19th century woman who basically threw the societal norms of her era completely out the window. How did she pull that off? Well, through constant, dramatic, and honestly, sometimes unbelievable reinvention. We're looking at a life that bridges completely disconnected worlds, and it's all recorded through her own prolific writings, her speeches, and an incomplete autobiography. So let's just get right into it.
So think about this for a second. What do opera, Abraham Lincoln, and the occult actually have in common? I mean, how on earth do these drastically different worlds connect? What could possibly tie together the high society world of the operatic stage, the really tense political theater of Lincoln's presidential campaigns, and the shadowy, mysterious world of 19th century occult societies?
Incredibly, the answer is just one person. Meet Emma Hardinge Britten. She was born Emma Floyd in London way back in 1823, and her story actually starts with a pretty unexpected tragedy. Her father, a schoolteacher named Ebenezer, passed away in 1834 when Emma was just 11 years old. So suddenly she's forced into a position where she has to support not just herself, but her whole family. And to do that, she turns to music. She actually trained as an opera singer and launched a legitimate stage career to make ends meet. But, as we're about to see, the opera stage was literally just the opening act of a profoundly bizarre life.
Part 1, the mind-reading opera singer.
Okay, so picture this. You've got this young opera singer working incredibly hard to support her family, but she possessed some truly unusual traits that went way beyond her vocal range. Even as a child, Emma was developing a major reputation for some apparent spiritual abilities. I'm talking about predicting futures based on visions she was seeing. Even more unsettling, she would reveal these hyper-specific details about deceased relatives she had absolutely zero prior knowledge of. But my absolute favorite part, she had this highly amusing talent of preemptively playing songs on the piano that her audience was only thinking about requesting. Like they hadn't even spoken the request out loud yet. It's wild, and it brilliantly illustrates her early, super deep connection to the supernatural, setting the stage for everything that comes next.
That brings us to part 2, seances and secret societies.
Because, when you can basically read minds at a piano, you're going to attract a certain kind of crowd. Emma's clairvoyant tendencies eventually drew her into this highly secretive London occult society. They were actively experimenting with magnetics and clairvoyant techniques for their own mysterious reasons. But this group was definitely not a safe haven. During her time with them, Emma faced some severe sexism and economic discrimination. But Emma was not the type to just back down quietly. She faced off against a highly manipulative member of the society and cleverly labeled him a baffled sensualist, which is just an absolute burn, right? That really shows her fierce independence. Now, there's very little reliable information left about this shadowy group today, but it is widely suspected that Emma received the name Hardinge from this very society, and it's a surname she chose to keep in use for the rest of her adult life.
So eventually, Emma crosses the Atlantic. She arrives in New York City with a remarkably cynical plan. She started attending spiritualist seances, specifically to write about and, frankly, mock what she called the gullibility of Americans. She really wanted to expose them. But her plan completely backfired. Instead of debunking the seances, being in that environment triggered her to start experiencing those mystical, visionary events from her dramatic childhood all over again. Under the careful guidance of a medium named Ada Hoyt, Emma's attempt to essentially troll the spiritualist movement resulted in her becoming a fully integrated, devoted part of it. And this transformation brings her to a totally new role, becoming a trance lecturer. The famous spiritualist Horace Day actually invited her to host seances at the Society for the Diffusion of Spiritual Knowledge. And from there, things just escalated. She started delivering speeches across the country while purportedly in an altered spiritual state. And these were not light topics either. She's touring the country giving intense speeches with titles like The Discovering of Spirits, Hades, and The Philosophy of the Spirit Circle. She had truly found her voice, and America was definitely listening.
All right. Part 3, spirits, speeches, and statesmen.
This is where things take a really shocking pivot. Emma steps directly out of the seance circle and into the explosive, high-stakes arena of national political campaigning. She took those immense public speaking skills she'd honed as a trance lecturer and applied them in a totally new direction.
In 1864, Emma delivered this massive, highly successful lecture titled The Coming Man, or the Next President of the United States. This wasn't spiritual philosophy. This was a direct political endorsement. That specific lecture was so incredibly influential that it launched her right into the 1864 campaign efforts supporting the re-election of Abraham Lincoln. She was officially invited to continue her political work, and she embarked on an incredible 32-lecture tour across the entire nation. Now, here is a crucial number for you to keep in mind: 36. That is the incredibly brief window of 36 hours between the tragic assassination of President Lincoln and Emma's response speech, which she delivered on April 14, 1865. Just think about that. To process a national trauma of that sheer magnitude and deliver a widely acclaimed oratorical response in a mere 36 hours is just staggering. Journalists at the time widely praised this specific speech as her absolute greatest achievement.
Now, naturally, when you're that prominent and you are literally crossing over between occult spiritualism and highly partisan national politics, you are going to draw some deeply polarizing reactions. And we see that perfectly captured here. On one hand, you have Isaac Selby. He heard her speak in Melbury later in life, and he firmly stated she was the greatest woman orator that ever visited Australia. But on the flip side, not all her lectures were warmly received. In 1866, the Saturday Review published this really harsh, satirical critique of her speeches, dismissing her whole style as bloated eloquence and referring to her content as just bunkum. It's a stark contrast, for sure, but it perfectly highlights how dynamically she was viewed by different audiences back then. She was nothing if not heavily debated.
Moving right along to Part 4, Publishing and Global Missions.
So after her political era, Emma shifts gears again, diving into a super prolific writing career and embarking on a massive global expansion. She basically used her massive public platform to meticulously chronicle the entire spiritualist movement. And her milestones happen fast. In 1870, she married William Britten, an ardent spiritualist from Boston, and she published this massive encyclopedia of the movement called Modern American Spiritualism. And since she was already super established professionally, she just kept publishing under the surname Hardinge. In 1872, she tries to start a magazine in Boston called The Western Star, but tragically, a series of devastating Boston fires ruined her impoverished clients, subscriptions dropped, and the magazine folded after just 6 issues. But she always bounced back. By 1876, she's back in New York, deeply involved in theosophy, and she even co-founded the Theosophical Society alongside Helena Blavatsky, though, spoiler alert, the two of them eventually had a pretty big falling out.
What's honestly amazing here is just the sheer global breadth of her later work. From 1878 to 1879, she and her husband worked as missionaries all the way out in Australia and New Zealand. And while she was in New Zealand, she took a really profound special interest in studying Maori spiritual beliefs. When she got back to New York, she wrote her greatest chronicle of the era, the 1884 book, 19th-Century Miracles. She also edited a book called Art Magic in 1876, which was written entirely anonymously with her help, leaving this strange, lingering mystery about who actually wrote it. Later on, she founded a weekly newspaper, The Two Worlds, in 1887, before eventually passing away in Manchester, England in 1899.
And finally, Part 5, The 7 Principles. We've seen her as a mind-reading opera singer and a cult experimentalist, a trance lecturer, a political surrogate for Lincoln, and a global missionary. But what is the actual permanent legacy of all this constant reinvention? Well, Emma Hardinge Britten is officially credited with defining the 7 principles of spiritualism. And these aren't just obscure historical footnotes. These exact principles, with only very minor tweaks, are still actively in use today. They serve as the foundational doctrines for both the National Spiritualist Association of Churches right here in the US and the Spiritualist National Union over in the UK. She didn't just participate in a movement, she laid down the architectural framework that allowed it to actually survive into the modern era. Which kind of leaves us with this final, provocative thought to wrap up our explainer today. How does a young woman who traveled to America with the express, totally cynical intention of exposing American gullibility end up drafting the eternal founding principles of the exact same movement she set out to mock? It's just a perfect, brilliant irony that encapsulates her whole existence. Emma Hardinge Britten was someone who let curiosity, rather than rigid expectations, drive her life, just constantly redefining who she was and what she believed. Thanks so much for joining me to explore her incredible story. I really hope it leaves you just as fascinated and eager to learn more as I am.